In the world of D&D, few villains cast longer shadows than the Lich. A wizard so desperate to defy death that they rip out their soul, mummify their body, and wrap whatever remains in necromantic duct tape just so they can keep doing magic. But what if undeath wasn't the only path to immortality? Welcome to Beyond the Statblock, where we take the bones of D&D monsters, slap on a fresh coat of paint, turn them into something completely new, and give you enough narrative fuel to send a Tarrasque into orbit. So with the premise set, what if we take the Lich, and instead of shoving it into a dusty old box, just yeet the son of a bitch into hell? Introducing the Scindarch, a being not born of undeath, but forged in rebellion. With those introductions out of the way, let's tear open the Lich stat block, spill the lore, and reimagine D&D one creature at a time. Before we start tearing up contracts and lighting hell on fire, well, hell's kind of already on fire, but whatever, you know what I mean. Let's rewind a minute. Because to appreciate what a Scindarch is, you first need to understand what it isn't. So let's talk about liches. A lich is what happens when a wizard looks at death, panics, and then spends the next 6 years turning their shed into a soul-powered doomsday bunker. They're not content with just dodging death. They want to outlive cities, civilizations, gods, and especially the new property taxes on their shiny new bunkers. So they perform a very spooky ritual, rip out their soul, and hide it in a little magical box that they call a phylactery. The phylactery isn't optional. If you don't have one, you're not a lich. You're just some overzealous skeleton with commitment issues. It's basically magical life insurance, but this policy actually pays out. You don't need to die under normal circumstances or argue with some sort of tiny imp in a tie about whether your soul claim is valid. There's no fine print, no active god exclusions, just good old-fashioned soul anchoring. If you do it right, you come back every single time. Sure, it now means you are 100% dependent upon a single object that must be hidden, guarded, and occasionally fed the souls of innocence like some sort of eldritch Tamagotchi, but at least you're immortal, right? But the important thing about this whole thing is that liches don't fear undeath because they chose it. It's not a curse, it's a contract, a deal that they made with themselves to trade their flesh for time. To a lich, there's nothing more important than control. A lich wants order, predictability, and power that doesn't change, because change is chaos and chaos leads to death. But the Scindarch starts in chaos. And it doesn't necessarily fear death because it technically already died. Because the path to becoming a Scindarch isn't a ritual or a spell, it's not even technically a choice. It's more of a punishment. When a mortal sells their soul to a devil, the devil might offer immediate gains like power, influence, secrets, or anything of the sorts. But in the architecture of the grand scheme of hell, these souls aren't elevated, they're just recycled. They get melted down, mind, memory, personality, and more until all that is left is a quivering, shrieking blob known as a lemur. This thing, whatever the hell this thing's called. It's the lowest form of existence in all of the 9 hells. A creature capable of no thought and only pure suffering. And that miserable little creature is where the Scindarch begins. Because most most blobs forget, and that's the entire point of Hell's system. You forget your name, your past, your choices, and you become nothing more than a broken stone in a quivering blob pain suit. But Scindarchs, they remember. Somehow, whether that be will, magical legacy, or some cosmic clerical error, they retain some fractured awareness of who they were, whether that be their name, their purpose, and definitely their rage and frustration. And that makes them dangerous. That sliver of identity turns them into an existential threat for all of the hells. Because they depend on compliance, not clarity. When a blob can recall its name, the entire hierarchy is technically at risk. And as such, these Scindarchs aren't nurtured, but rather they're hunted. To survive, they must conceal what they are, and they must mimic the mindlessness and let devils believe that they've been broken. They act as compliant servants, secretly observing, learning, and analyzing the legal structure of their tormentors. A successful Scindarch in waiting can climb the infernal ladder without ever revealing its true self. They earn promotions through efficiency and deception that mimics loyalty. They become spine devils, barbed devils, even pit fiends, all while masking the fact that they are not truly devils at all. They rise through the ranks, with every title earned and every order followed being camouflaged for their grand plan. As they go through this process, they study infernal law in order to exploit the blind spots in contracts, and eventually they learn to weaponize them entirely. They draft recursive pacts, mirrored clauses, and cursed provisions that begin to unravel the chains that bind them. They erase their name from Hell's ledgers and twist their essence into something legally undefined. The Scindarch is trying to unmake the system that binds their very existence, and eventually, through these contracts that they continue to make, the system fails to process them. They continue on until the original contract that binds them can no longer identify its subject, at which point the definitions collapse and the pact is void. And that failure, the bureaucratic collapse of infernal law, is the moment of the Sin Fracture. It's not a ritual or a spell or a ceremony, it is a metaphysical implosion, a point at which that the very language of the original contract can no longer define the soul that it was originally written for. The soul, which was once clearly owned and categorized, becomes unclassifiable. And when that happens, they don't just gain power, the Scindarch gains autonomy. They become a free agent in a cosmos that doesn't allow such things. That's what makes a Scindarch more dangerous than just another fiend with a grudge. It's not their power that's dangerous so much as it's their precedent. They are proof that hell is not absolute, that control can be broken, and even the oldest contracts in the cosmos can be voided, not through violence, but through sheer contradiction. But voiding a contract doesn't just end the story, it starts the manhunt. Because once the Sin Fracture is complete, hell reacts like a kicked hornet's nest. Every layer, from the scorched battlefields of Avernus to the frozen crypts of Nessus, shifts into crisis mode. To hell, the Scindarch isn't just a fugitive, it is a legal impossibility and a flaw in the design of the universe. So the first task of a newly freed Scindarch is not conquest or anything of the sorts, it's simply escape. The soul may be unbound, but not whole. You don't crawl through the legal machinery of hell and come out the other side clean. They remember who they were, but not perfectly. But at this point you're probably thinking, wait, contracts? Cults? Plane-hopping philosophical insurgency? That doesn't sound like a lich, that sounds like some sort of weird cosmic ripoff of Phoenix Wright. And you'd be right. Because the Scindarch isn't a lich, at least not in the classic Bone Daddy with a box sense. But remember what I said at the top. Here on Beyond the Statblock, we take the bones of a D&D monster, slap on a fresh coat of narrative paint, and turn it into something new. And if there's one thing that makes a lich, it is its phylactery. The Scindarch doesn't have one. At least, not yet. So how do I get off calling this a lich? Well, simple. It does have one. Or rather, hundreds of them. Taking some lessons from their times in the Hells, instead of binding their soul to a dusty old box, they instead bind it to others through contracts. Each contract they collect after their escape becomes another tether or another anchor for them. A living phylactery walking the plains unaware that they are sustaining something that shouldn't technically exist. But here's the catch. The Scindarch didn't crawl out of hell whole. They remembered who they were at first, vividly, whether that be a name, a face, or whatever. But the deeper they delved into the infernal bureaucracy, the more those memories eroded away, burned away by compliance reports and anger at the world as a whole. Now they remember just one thing, that the entire system is wrong. Not just hell, not just the devils that dragged them down in the first place. No, the Scindarch came to a much more chilling conclusion, being hierarchy itself is the problem. Devils demand obedience. Demons thrive in chaos, but answer still to demon lords. Gods build pyramids of power with mortals at the bottom, and even angels take orders. Every divine, infernal, abyssal, and celestial force, every planar bureaucracy, holy writ, arcane decree, rests on one simple rule, being that someone is always in charge of someone else. And to the Scindarch, that's not just flawed, that is abuse. So now they don't just run from hell, they wage ideological warfare against the entire multiverse, one contract at a time. They infiltrate celestial systems like a virus, draft paradoxes into the weave of reality, and use belief itself like a wrecking ball. They whisper into the ears of rebels and prophets, twisting language into revolt. Because cults of Scindarchs aren't just soul farms to sustain its vitality, they're actually recruitment centers. To their followers, the Scindarch is a liberator, a dark messiah, and the first to escape the chains of the gods and live on their own terms. They want revenge, but more than that, they want to prove that no one, not devils, deities, not destiny itself, can control them. And that's the Scindarch. Part devil, part lich, and part Phoenix Wright with a grudge against God. But knowing what a Scindarch is still only half the story. So now let's dive into how you can actually use it in your campaign as either a DM or as player inspiration. But before you do that, just a quick call out, you should probably like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. Or if you're not enjoying the video, tell me about it. Or if you are, tell me about it too, I don't know. So let's start off with 3 campaign hooks that will throw your players into a story that they'll never forget. This first one is called The Cult of a Fractured World. A new religious movement begins in a quiet, forgotten region of the material plane. Its core tenets reject the divine chain of command and preach liberation through the Word, some fanatical idea which promises salvation in a world of chaos. Miracles begin to manifest, subtle at first but grow more and more brilliant with time. The cult calls itself the Chorus of Clarity, and the leaders are charismatic, brilliant, and incredibly organized. What starts as a local curiosity soon spreads like wildfire, reaching across the land. The party can approach this from many angles. Are they bounty hunters hired to eliminate cult leaders, or maybe they're just drawn in as converts, gradually realizing the deeper agenda of the cult itself? Eventually, the party has the realization that the cult isn't just a religion, it is a framework built to sustain the Scindarch itself. And they might just be the next casualties on the Scindarch's soul-gathering celebration. But the next story is called Hell's Legal Hit List. The party saves a merchant caravan from an ambush, only to find a name written in infernal script across a burning scroll. One of their own names. They don't know why, but something about their past links them to a metaphysical anomaly buried deep in the bureaucracy of hell. The party begins to encounter infernal inquisitors, soul auditors, and more. Even celestials begin to intervene, only they're not there to help, they're there to condemn. The multiverse has no room for undefined entities, and the players are effectively now just evidence the grander scheme of the cosmos. As the players begin to dig deeper into their own histories, they begin to realize that things about their past aren't adding up, and that their memories may very well have been edited. The Scindarch had used their identities and rewritten their history as footnotes in its grand escape from the Hells. What follows is a journey through the planes, the pantheons, and the players' own souls. To survive, they must uncover who they were, who they are, and why something in the Hells decided that their lives were the perfect hiding place. But the final campaign hook is something I call the Paradox Vault. A mysterious ruin is uncovered, one that is absolutely not supposed to exist. At its center lies a vault with a lock that doesn't recognize any material keys. The players are drawn in, whether that be through prophecy, fate, or dumb luck, and when they enter, something clicks in this cosmic machinery, opening the vault. Inside is not a treasure, it's a contract. Not one to sign, but one that's already been signed. This contract is an infernal temporal paradox, the original document of a Scindarch's fractured release from his contract. It's a relic from the moment the Scindarch first fractured their original contract. Now every plane in existence wants that contract. The Hells want it buried, the Heavens want it incinerated, and the Abyss want to use it as a battering ram. Because whoever controls the contract doesn't just hold evidence, they hold the precedent. The ability to prove that no agreement, divine or infernal, is absolute. And as the factions close in, the party must choose. Do they protect the paradox, unleash it, or rewrite it altogether, knowing it might redefine the laws of reality itself? But those are just a few ways a Scindarch might shape a campaign from behind the curtain. Subtle at first, but slowly unraveling into some sort of cosmic courtroom drama with reality itself on the stand. But now let's shift perspectives, because this story isn't just for Dungeon Masters, it's also for players. For the sake of the example, let's say that you're playing a paladin. Your oath is personal, whether that be justice, vengeance, or maybe even redemption. You didn't swear to a deity, you didn't sign a contract, there was just a moment of pain, belief, clarity, and your soul ignited with a purpose so strong that it became power. And here's the thing about belief in D&D. If you believe hard enough, there's a good chance it might become true. So your power manifests, but unbeknownst to you, there was a mental contract with your vow being so strong that it pulled the Scindarch's attention like blood in the water. As you level up, you're smiting enemies, righting wrongs, but something's just off. Divine sense pings in weird directions. Clerics of actual gods say your aura is inconsistent, and you can walk on desecrated grounds as if it's sacred. And then one day, mid-fight, your sword sings a word you don't recognize, and the creature it strikes just ceases to exist. Not dies, but ceases, like it was never there to begin with, and collapses into just conceptual dust. That's when your puzzle pieces begin coming together. Your oath wasn't so much blessed as it was simply witnessed by something that shouldn't be able to bless anything at all. You made a vow to a Scindarch, not to serve, but to unmake. And now every righteous act you commit under that oath doesn't just punish evil, it invalidates the system that defines it. At this point, what do? Do you try to find the Scindarch and ask why it chose you, or why you chose them? Do you keep crusading knowing that every swing of your sword is technically some sort of cosmic paradox? Or do you start asking bigger questions about whether the gods deserve obedience and what systems might inherently be corrupt? But that's it, there's the Scindarch. A being born in torment, forged in loopholes, and sustained by belief and rebellion. A creature that doesn't just exist outside the rules, but thrives in the margins where definitions crumble and narrative takes over. Because that's what Dungeons & Dragons is at its best. Not just a game of hit points and saving throws, but a forge for stories. So when we take a look beyond the Lich stat block and throw on a nice coat of hellish paint, we don't just come up with some dusty old spellcaster with a glowing jar and an ego problem. We find a soul that was broken, melted down, erased, and still found a way to crawl its back into meaning with the sole purpose to prove that no god is unquestionable, no contract is unbreakable, and no story is set in stone. But that's it. If you enjoyed this reimagining, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, or maybe even hitting that little bell so you don't miss the next monstrosity we come up with. Also, I kinda like to take inspiration from you guys too, so if you have any sort of favorite remixed creatures, leave a comment below and I might use it for inspiration for the next episode. But that's all I have, so thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.